Sustain 267.
Good morning, Botswana at large, and to our lovely listeners on Yarana FM. Thank you so much for coming back. Welcome to the Sustain 267 feature, which happens every Wednesday here on Yarana FM at 9:40 a.m. Today is an exciting one, in my opinion. We are celebrating Africa Day, which happened just a few days ago on May 25th, and we're celebrating the founding of the Organization of African Unity. Now, the African Union has shared its very powerful and urgent theme, which is assuring sustainable water availability and safe sanitation systems to achieve the goals of Agenda 2063. To help me unpack this today, I'm not alone. I'm joined by the lovely Ofentse Lesego, who is a water resources researcher, environmental consultant, and an expert in hydrology and sustainability from Botswana. Ofentse, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Hello, Nicole, and thank you very much for inviting me, and hello to your listeners as well.
Of course. So let's jump right into it. Let's start with the big picture. The African Union has chosen the theme, as I mentioned, assuring sustainable water availability and safe sanitation systems as its 2026 theme, right? So from your perspective as a water resources researcher and environmental consultant, why is this theme so critical for Africa's development under especially Agenda 2063 right now?
Well, I think, first of all, for Africa, the context of water is that we get to appreciate that water is central to health. It is central to food production, to economic development. It is central to energy. And safe sanitation as well is critical for public health and human dignity. And still with that, Africa is facing increasing climate pressures because it's subjected to droughts and water stress. This is further compounded by rapid urbanization and population growth that are driving increasing demand for water resources. However, sustainable water systems are necessary still for climate resilience and long-term development of the African continent. So I believe this is why in this year's theme, it hinges heavily on water security and sanitation access.
Thank you so much for that. I'm very happy that you mentioned both public health and human dignity, because even though we are talking about sanitation systems, it really boils down to basic human dignity at the end of the day. Many of our listeners here in Botswana, especially, and the wider Southern Africa region, obviously feel the effects of water challenges daily, right? So, what are some of the biggest barriers to achieving sustainable water access and safe sanitation across Africa at large, particularly in such semi-arid regions like ours? And then also, I'm going to ask you both these questions at the same time. So, as a double question to this, I guess, as a water researcher yourself, are there any common misconceptions about water scarcity that you often encounter in your work?
Yeah, these are very good questions, by the way. I'll start with the barriers themselves. You mentioned the context of arid and semi-arid regions. So the first barrier would have to be the climate variability and recurring droughts. We know that we have exchanges of the El Nino and La Nina cycles, with El Nino always bringing in the extensive droughts. Then additionally, we have an issue of aging and inadequate infrastructure systems throughout Africa, which is further compounded also by the limited financing for water and sanitation infrastructure. So primarily, these are some of the big barriers that we get to see that are running across as themes in the African continent. And the misconceptions, particularly about water and water scarcity, we get to see there's a false interpretation that water scarcity means that there is no water. I just mentioned in the barriers just a second ago that water scarcity doesn't necessarily mean that there is no water. In many cases, there is. In fact, issues of water scarcity primarily speak to access. This means infrastructure, this means treatment, this means governance. So these are some of the misconceptions that we get. And also, groundwater resources may exist, but remain largely undeveloped and poorly managed. We have a lot of groundwater resources here in Africa, which we are still yet to explore. And in some arid regions, we find that some of that groundwater is a bit saline and it needs a bit of treatment. This is what limits the accessibility to those kind of water resources.
Access is a word that always comes up in a lot of systems that we talk about, right? And something
Yeah,
that you said is actually going to lead me into my next question. You mentioned how one of the barriers in is inadequate infrastructure systems, right?
yeah,
These infrastructure systems are used for monitoring purposes, like you mentioned in your answer just now. And monitoring and accountability are two aspects that are very important in the water and sanitation sector. I know
yeah,
that there's different platforms such as the Global Analysis and Assessment of Sanitation and Drinking Water. That's a
yeah,
mouthful. But I know that these different platforms definitely provide data on governance, financing, human resources, and progress towards certain targets, right?
yeah.
So, how important is data-driven decision making for thus improving water scarcity or water security rather, and sanitation services in Africa? And what key gaps do you think still need attention?
That's another great question, by the way. So I think uh, data-driven decision-making helps governments prioritize investments more effectively. You're just speaking about the UN Plus data portal, which is a mouthful, like you said, but helping for us doing those monitoring and evaluation systems in water resources helps us to kind of pinpoint where the pressure points are, where our losses are, where we need to get more efficiency out of our water, and therefore helps governments prioritize those investments much more effectively. Additionally, it helps strengthen collaboration between governments and development partners. We know that most of our water infrastructure is primarily funded from relationships between our governments and development partners. So it helps build a clear business case from the government to its financiers to say, out of all the data that we have, we've indicated that these are where we shortfall, and this is where we need to improve. So helping governments collaborate better with development partners.
Thank you so much for that collaboration, guys. We cannot work in silos and we have the data. So I definitely think that is such a huge entry point into government and simply improving water security. As we
Yeah.
wrap up, Ofentse, what message would you like to leave with our listeners? A call to action, especially young Africans who may be inspired to get involved in water and sanitation or simply environmental work after hearing this conversation between you and I this morning.
I believe that water is a very huge space, and that there's a lot of, we can say there's a huge piece of the pie for each and every single one of us. And I just want to invite more young people to explore water in the field of research, in the field of development practice, and also in activism. Most of the time, it's intertwined with climate action, and which is good, but to give more emphasis on it, it would be much more ideal to get more advocacy in water resources. So probably my call would be to young people to say, let us continue to make visible, let us continue to make loud issues about our water systems, including water ecosystems, wetlands, and everything, so that we get to make our water systems much more resilient.
Very wise words indeed. Ofentse, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insights with us this morning. Your work and passion in water really give us a lot of hope for a water secure continent, which to our listeners, I'm sure we all appreciate that. Let's all play our part, whether big or small, in protecting our water resources and advocating for better sanitation in general. If anybody wants to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Oh, yes. I'm open to collaborate, to interact, primarily on LinkedIn. That's where you'll find me, Ofentse Lesego. That's my page. So let us interact on LinkedIn.
Amazing. And this was Nicole Rumbe. If you want to reach out to me personally, I'm most active on LinkedIn. It's just Nicole Rumbe. But if you want to reach out to anyone in the Sustain 267 team, Google Sustain 267. We're everywhere. We have a podcast on Spotify and Apple Music, a YouTube page, a website, an Instagrams page, a Facebook page, an X page. Guys, there's absolutely no reason why you will not be able to catch us or interact with us if you just Google Sustain 267. This has been the Wednesday feature. Thank you, Lorato, so much for having us again this Wednesday, and I hope you have an amazing day. Cheers.